Hello, and welcome to the uh, second episode of the standard error segments. I think I've fixed the recording issue. It was recording the screen at a smaller resolution than the actual recording resolution. So when I went to stretch it out, you could see all the pixels because it was 1920 by 1080, and then you'd stretch it out from a smaller thing, and it's just a silly mistake. But um, yeah, figured out that it was my fault. But anywho, um, I wanted to make another one of these just by myself. Sort of introducing, if the title or description doesn't say, schizophrenia. It's a pretty interesting mental disorder that the media tries to take advantage of, I feel like. Sometimes it's represented in, uh, you know, uh, proper ways or realistic ways, and sometimes it's a little bit mangled. And I think after I introduce it a little bit, it might be easy to see why that is. Um, but yeah, I guess other than that, I guess we can get started. One of the big reasons why it's manipulated in the media is because of its abundance of symptoms and its variability amongst uh, cases. Um, but I'm just gonna preface this. I'm no expert in this mental disorder, so like I couldn't tell you, every idiosyncratic thing between this and other kinds of disorders involving psychosis or things of the sort. But I feel like I have maybe a bit more knowledge than the layman or average person. Um, that's not to say I'm in any position to defend what I'm saying. I'm just taking what I learned from studying this particular disorder in class and giving anyone who watches the information that I've learned. So, without further ado, I guess we can get started. Um, there's no pretty way to introduce this, so I'll introduce it in kind of a temporal sense. So there's three phases to schizophrenia. Um, Actually, here, yes, there are three phases to it. Schizophrenia has to. Schizophrenia is a very big disorder, and when I say big, I mean big as in there are a lot of things that can distinguish it from lesser, like more minor schizophrenic related disorders. So there's this other disorder called schizoaffective disorder. It's very similarly spelled, and it's basically a shorter length of it's literally just a shorter length of schizophrenia. It's schizophrenia means that the disorder has been prevalent for more than 6 months, and the active phase, which I'll get to in just a minute. Active, I'll put it here. The active phase is lasts for at least 1 month. I'm just gonna say +1. Um, there's also something lesser than schizoaffective disorder, which happens when you have so this is less than 6 months, but more than 1 month. So 1 to 6 months, and then if you have anything less than that, it's called a brief psychotic episode. And yeah, that's just like 1 day to 1 month in length. So I guess we can get started on the bigger aspect. So anything I say about schizophrenia could be attributed to these two, but with a longer temporal phase or longer temporal phases. So yeah, in the middle you have the active phase. I'll go through through the prodromal phase because it ties in fairly well to the active phase, and then I'll go over the residual phase. And this is just an introduction. There's a lot more to it, like very specific things that might differ one part of a particular symptom, stuff like that. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them in the comments. If not, I can 100% find you a resource to maybe see for yourself, so that you're not getting like secondary information from me. You could probably find it yourself, or anything like that. So the prodromal phase is the events leading up to the active phase. And the prodromal phase is characterized by suppressed positive symptoms. Positive symptoms include behaviors that are an increase to behavior, are actions that are an increase to one's behavior. And so these things include, well, it's not, a better word for suppress is attenuated, but they've made like fairly similar things in different contexts. Attenuated could also be like filtered, but in this context it's suppressed. And what do these include? These include catatonia, catatonia, which is a movement disorder. When you see, I'll give you an example. A type of symptom of a symptom, I guess, of catatonia is waxy flexibility. Waxy flexibility is when like wax is very sticky and stiff to an extent, and flexibility means what it is. So if you can imagine like stiff flexibility, and so these people would be stuck in place almost, but they're conscious, they're just stuck in place. So they could be standing up with one knee up and then their hands are in the air, and you know, maybe their hip is to the side a little bit, and they'd be stuck in that position. They'd need help moving around because they were stuck in that kind of a position. Another symptom, hallucinations. If you don't know what a hallucination is, I'm not going to tell you how to get one, but it's a surreal perception. Any perception that isn't in the real world that you're experiencing is a hallucination. And a delusion is another positive symptom that can happen. And delusion is a belief that you have that's not true. And so, okay, I should probably explain this just a little bit more. That doesn't mean that you like, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna ask out my crush or something and she's gonna say yes, or she's gonna say no. That's not like, it's not. I know saying a hypothetical is not a great way to explain this, but a delusion is a very are usually categorized by an abstract belief, and so it's like, if I don't wear a green shirt today, aliens are going to be hovering the earth and monitoring me. So that's a very, very extreme delusion, in my opinion, or at least from different videos I've seen of patients with schizophrenia, or like the there are a couple of YouTube videos where they kind of go through these weird video animated experiences of schizophrenia, and this guy had his coffee and he looked into his coffee cup and there was like explosions happening. Like, I feel like that's a pretty extreme hallucination. But there was one really good part of that video where he was talking to where he was sitting down and he was looking at the news anchor and he felt like the news anchor was talking to him. That's a that's like a distortion or a delusion or like a hallucination that can happen. Another positive symptom. Oh, one of the other positive symptoms is disorganized speech. I can't write disorganized speech, and that's pretty literal. It's nothing else to it. But disorganized speech does come with other things. It's not only disorganized speech. Disorganized thoughts do also tie into this. So it's not only having trouble literally speaking, but they also have incoherent thoughts, loose associations between thoughts. So they can't keep. It's like if the normal perception of ADHD where they can't focus on one thing. Instead, they can't focus on anything, or at least focus on any thought that they have. They also have neologisms, which are made-up words. I'll just spell this word out. Neologism is a made-up word. Made-up word. Make use of this pen tablet that I got for Christmas. All right. Active phase. Active phase is characterized by an onset of any positive symptoms or negative symptoms. So the strict diagnosis or the non-continuum diagnosis is to have at least two symptoms with at least one being the first three that I'll write down. One being first three. So the first three are delusions, hallucinations, and catatone. Oh my goodness, I'm going to erase this. Goodness gracious, I can't write. And catatonia. So one of the symptoms has to be the first three. They can have like two from the first three. They can have all three from the first three, and that'd be pretty debilitating, I would say. But catatonia is not one of the first three. I'm so sorry. Catatonia is a symptom. Disorganized speech, or the thought disorder. The thought disorder that I went through just briefly over here, that's one of the first three. So they can have any, like two of them or even all three of them, and that's pretty debilitating. Additional symptoms that they could have with one of them being the first three is catatonia or negative symptoms. And I'll go over negative symptoms when I get to the residual stage. And it's not the opposite of positive symptoms. I don't know how they could be opposites. You have a disbelief of a specific thing, but instead that's actually another belief, so you can't really say it's a disbelief of a certain thing. You can't have a reverse hallucination, because that would probably also be considered hallucination. If you lack to see something, that's probably a different visual disorder. If you lack to hear something, it's probably some sort of sensory disorder, like depending on the sensory modality, auditory disorder, tactile disorder. If you try to touch something specific and you can't touch it, that's a very interesting problem. And these have to go for at least 1 month. You have to have these symptoms be at like 100%. They're not particularly attenuated. So, if your hallucinations were that you would see dogs out your window barking at you as the attenuated symptom, during the active phase, if you still had that specific specific flavor of hallucination, we'll say. It's not a very nice word to use, but if you had that specific kind of hallucination within the active phase, it would probably be you would hear your door being banged on by the dogs, or you would hear them, let's say you lived second floor of a house, or if you lived in the 10th floor of a building, you could still hear them, and they got louder as you got onto your balcony or as you opened the window, kind of thing. And that would also tie into a delusion, having that belief that, or I guess a very minor extent of delusion, because when you open the window, they're louder. So that's how the categorization is for the active phase. And so the prodromal phase is just the attenuation of positive symptoms. Usually you can have negative symptoms. I'm not saying you can't, and it's happened. It's generally characterized by having attenuated positive symptoms. And then the onset of the active phase is when these symptoms become more blown out, and the patient is debilitated a bit more. Now the residual phase is mostly characterized by, we'll say suppressed negative symptoms. And if positive symptoms are actions that increase behavior, this is where the opposite comes in. They are actions that decrease behavior. So it's not specifically the opposites of the symptoms that I've written already. It's more like what you can take from a normal person and reduce it. And I'll go over a few, just because I'm running at 17 minutes already, and I like to make these particularly short. But this is a complicated disorder. People go their whole careers over this disorder. I kind of want to do a forensic psychology employment occupation. That's kind of what I really, really enjoy. Even though most of my research projects this semester are not related to that, it's still, you gotta dip your hand in every pond. Gotta use each color of paint on your painting. Okay. Stop wasting time. Okay. So, anhedonia is a pretty popular one. Anhedonia. It's can't be happy. We'll just say that. Can't have pleasure is a better way. Pleasure. And so there is a little bit of debate about whether or not the individual can't feel pleasure or can't express pleasure, because those are different things fundamentally. But the idea is that when you see them not having pleasure, you can attribute this to some sort of anhedonia. Depression is something else, if that's what you were thinking. Depressed people are anhedonic, but you don't call them anhedonic. You call them depressed. It's not because they can't be happy. It's because they are actually sad. Anhedonic doesn't mean sad. It means can't be happy or can't have pleasure. Just to make that divide clear. Another, I guess, more pop, or here we'll do alogia. Can't talk. Okay, no, I'm not gonna say can't. That's a bad word. Reluctancy. Strong reluctancy. It's not that they can't talk. It's that they will choose not to in with regard to quantity and quality. So you ask them, do you want coffee? Yes. How do you want it? Sweet. What does sweet mean? Could mean 1 sugar, could mean 2 sugars, could mean 3 sugars. You don't know them specifically. Maybe it could be cream. Maybe they don't drink sugar, but they find that cream is better explained by saying sweet than saying milky, right? So it's strong. It's reducing the amount of things that they say and quality of what they say. Strong reluctancy talk. I just noticed that. I'll go over 2 more. and then I'll wrap up just a bit, just for a second. Flat effect. I think this is a pretty popular one. At least I've heard it before in like medical dramas. Flat effect is a severe reduction in emotional experience. So any sort of emotional experience like fear or pain, joy, positive, negative sensations. Reduct emote. That's a good way to put it. The person just seems flat. They don't seem like they're not. It's like a little bit discomforting to be around. You tell them a joke, and they don't laugh as much, or they have, or maybe they have trouble expressing that it's funny. They think it's funny, but they can't say it's funny. You show them the movie Titanic, and they're like me and super cold-hearted, and they don't cry or whatever. I've never seen the movie, so I'm just assuming. Or the Fall in Our Stars. I heard that was pretty sad. I don't know. Last but not least, I'm not gonna say that. Lastly, that I'll go over Sociality. I am a great grapher. Lack of motivation to engage in social interactions. Lack of friends. It's not that they don't have friends. It's just this is a pretty easy way to kind of digest it. It's they won't. It's not as much as like, oh, your friend doesn't start a conversation with you, but once you start a conversation with them, they're very passive when they talk. I mean, that's kind of asocial, but it's more so. It's kind of like that, but imagine you message that kind of person and they don't message back, and then when you see them in person, they might interact with you for a bit, but you have to be the one that engages or carry the conversation and do everything else that the friend is supposed to do. And so after the active phase happens, the residual phase is when the cutoff for the schizophrenic episode, which is quite a long time, like at least 6 months. And so the residual phase is usually what'll be on the back end of the active phase. So think like the negative symptoms are generally attenuated, and you generally see attenuated negative symptoms within the residual phase. That is if there is a residual phase or even a prodromal phase. Sometimes the active phase happens and it's 5 months of residual phase, or 5 months of prodromal phase and 1 month of active phase. It's very different depending on each case, and each case should be taken for what it is, for the merit that it holds. Merit's not a good word for this. For this particular conversation, but that's what it is. Oh, you know what? I just messed something up. Okay, before we wrap up the video, it's not schizoaffective disorder. I said that at the beginning, and if you are paying attention or writing notes, I hope you're not. I hope you're just here for the conversation. Schizoaffective disorder is not the smaller form. It's called. Let me actually just erase it. Whoop. Schizo. It's actually like a longer name, phreniform, which is the smaller version, which is less than 6 months, longer than 1 month of schizophrenic episode. Schizoaffective disorder is it's very similar to schizophrenia, except it requires a manic or depressive episode. And I'll go over those maybe in another video. This video is pretty long though. But yeah, sorry for that. I'm very sorry for that. Like I said, I'm a student, and I took maybe a couple classes that introduced this disorder in different ways. But then again, I was doing a lot of this from memory. So please go easy on me. um, uh, yeah, thank you very much for listening. I just wanted to make this video for some kind of sort of an introduction to a podcast that I'm planning to hold later down the line about misconceptions in mental disorders. So what my friends or peers that I interview think, and then I can give them a perspective or from what I've learned, and then maybe if I find a cool article that's relevant to what I'm talking about, I'll bring it up and introduce it there. But yeah, this is kind of the introduction to schizophrenia, and kind of like a taste of what we might talk about in the longer podcast. I know this episode's been 25 minutes already, but yeah, I appreciate you listening if you've listened the whole way through, and I hope you have a wonderful day, night, or week, and yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice one.